Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I'm a priest of the Legionaries of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we are on day 168 and we're covering Autatum Totius 17 to 18 on understanding material, not just repeating words. So if you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday we spoke about the need to study theology well, including history, not just the dogma. And then today we are going to cover the end of the revision of ecclesiastical studies, which is chapter 5. And this will be on the theology should form the heart, and some can be sent on to further studies. Both these paragraphs are pretty straightforward and pretty short, so we'll probably be done a little early today. So paragraph 17, the summary is that doctrine should not just be ideas, but should form seminarians' hearts. Let's read it. But says doctrinal training ought to tend not to a mere communication of ideas, but to a true and intimate formation of the students. Teaching methods are to be revised both as regards lectures, discussions, and seminars, and also the development of study on the parts of students, whether done privately or in small groups. Unity and soundness of the entire training is carefully to be provided for by avoiding an excess of multiplication of courses and lectures, and by the omission of those questions which scarcely retain any importance or which ought to be referred to higher academic studies. So, this is pretty straightforward, right? Doctrine is helpful, but it's not just all in this abstract. The devil knows the catechism. The devil could quote the catechism if he thought it would make you tempted. But he doesn't live the catechism. That doctrine has to touch the heart. The ethics have to touch the heart. I have to have that communication with the Trinity in my prayer, that proclamation of the Trinity with my words and my actions, and not just, hey, I understood the Trinity in Trinity class. That's what this number is saying. We have to have these students, these seminarians, really take it to heart and not just be able to recite from memory the dogmas. That's an important aspect. Although it's good for them to recite those dogmas too, we need to know this and go deeper. And then we need to revise teaching to better get to the heart. Seminarians need to learn that self-discipline. There is that aspect of, it says, on their own studying. And then there's the question of multiplying courses. What course do we have and what course do we skip? What questions do we address? What questions do we not? And do we need to address every little possible theoretical question or go deeper in the core questions, which is really what they're asking? Because a lot of what happened in the first half of the 20th century that they're critiquing here is getting into all these fine details and missing some of the core questions that are more important. And here, they also talk about higher academic studies. There are topics I covered in my STL that maybe they might have covered in MDiv back in the day or something. But we realize, okay, these are not as important, so we're going to leave them off for later studies, for those who take them, because not everybody does an STL. STL is a sacred theology license. It's between a master's and a doctoral degree because the ecclesiastical structure is a little different from the normal American structure. I did mine at Sacred Heart in Detroit, Michigan. Anyway, so moving on to paragraph 18, our last paragraph in this section is about sending talented men to higher institutes. So let's read it. It's pretty straightforward. It will be the bishop's concern that young men suited by temperament, virtue, and ability be sent to special institutes, faculties, or universities, so that priests may be trained in a higher scientific level in the sacred sciences and in other fields which may be judged opportune. Thus, they'll be able to meet the various needs of the apostolate. The spiritual and pastoral training of these men, however, especially if they're not yet ordained as priests, is to no way be neglected. So this is mainly about priests who are already ordained and they're going through their STL, which I mentioned, or they're going to study canon law, they're going to get a doctoral degree, they're going to do all these different studies. And it's important to have priests who have these studies. This is often done at CUA in DC, Rome. There's a few other places to do it. Like I mentioned, I did mine at Sacred Heart in Detroit. I did my STL. I did my STD or STHD, my doctoral degree back in Rome. And then I'd done my Master's of Divinity, the previous degree to the STL there in Rome as well. Anyway, so that's the idea. that we want a stricter, deeper level. And this is not to say we're going to do this for everybody. And it's not to say that we just neglect the other things. They still need the pastoral training, as noted. We need the ones who are temperament, virtue, and ability. Because certain people, if you just give them too much, are just going to be too proud. St. Francis of Assisi even had an issue where he thought maybe it was better just to not have any intellectual training for the Franciscans so they wouldn't get proud. But St. Bonaventure and a few others convinced him, no, we should have some training because we want to be able to teach people. And St. Francis relented. But that idea of not getting proud, not getting full of oneself is important when you do these extra studies. So, anyways, let's conclude. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a podcast I do on a volunteer basis, and my local religious community relies on donations to help pay our bills. If you want to support my community, you can go to patreon.com/frmatthewlc. There's also a link for a one-time donation on my own site, frmatthewlc.com, and you can also donate to support StarQuest at sqpn.com/give. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Optatum Totius, which is 19 to 20, on pastoral training or the pastoral formation. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which will provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, such as playlists for individual documents and a reading plan. Amen.